My name is Dr. Andrew Keller. I'm a hospitalist at St. Raymond's Medical Center in Chicago. That's a fancy way of saying I'm one of those internal medicine guys who manages patients once they're admitted. Pneumonia, sepsis, strokes, mystery fevers, I see it all. My job is to coordinate care, solve puzzles, and hopefully get people out of here alive. Some days, I feel like a detective. Other days, more like a firefighter, constantly responding to alarms, trying to prevent everything from burning down. But nothing in med school, residency, or the last 12 years of practice prepared me for what happened the week we admitted Mr. Elijah Brooks. That IT started like any other Monday. Cold, gray. We were on winter surge, and the ER was packed with flu cases and fall injuries. My pager buzzed at 7:12 a.m. New admission, Elijah Brooks, 67-year-old male, altered mental status, fever, hypotension, possible sepsis. Room 409. I grabbed my coffee and headed up to 4 North. When I walked into 409, I saw an elderly black man lying in bed, eyes half open, skin ashen, vitals unstable. His chart was thin, no primary care provider, no listed medications, no family contacts. The paramedics said he was found collapsed near a bus stop in South Shore. Homeless, maybe. No wallet. I introduced myself, though I wasn't sure he could hear me. Mr. Brooks? Can you hear me? He groaned faintly. No words. I asked him to squeeze my hand. He tried. Weakly. His labs were a mess. White count through the roof. Creatinine. Elevated. Liver enzymes off the charts. Classic signs of multi-organ dysfunction. But the cultures were still pending, and no obvious infection site jumped out at us. No cough. No wound. No urinary symptoms. That we started broad-spectrum antibiotics, fluids, pressors. The usual protocol. By day 2, he was still declining. His oxygen needs climbed. He drifted in and out of lucidity. Sometimes he'd mumble something, a name, maybe. Mira, he'd whisper. Find Mira. The nurses asked me, do you think it's a daughter? I didn't know. But the way he said it, it stuck with me. That night, I stayed late and dug deeper. No ID. No medical record in the Chicago database. But his fingerprints, taken by the ED, turned up a small file. A decades-old arrest for trespassing, dismissed. He'd been off the grid for years. On day 3, we had a breakthrough. A nurse named Rosa noticed something odd while cleaning him. A faded tattoo on his left shoulder, barely visible. It's Hebrew, she told me. I think it says Emmett. Truth. I asked the social worker to run another check. This time, with the name Elijah Brooks plus Mira plus tattoo. She found something. A yearbook. Entry from 1984. Elijah Brooks, physics teacher at Inglewood High. There was even a school photo. It was him. Just 40 years younger, healthy, and smiling. That same yearbook listed a student, Mira Brooks. Possibly his daughter. I felt a chill. How does a man go from a science teacher with a daughter to this? Alone, collapsed in the street, organs shutting down. I needed answers. I spent my lunch break trying to find Mira. Nothing current under that name. No phone number. No address. But eventually, I stumbled across a blog post from a nonprofit focused on Chicago's displaced seniors. And it was a story about a woman whose father vanished after a mental health crisis in 2009. She said she still lit a candle for him every year. Her name, Mira Sanderson. Nate Brooks. I reached out to the nonprofit. They passed on my message. Point 2. Days later, on a snowy Thursday afternoon, Mira walked into room 409. I'll never forget the look on her face. She was maybe in her late 30s. Wore a navy coat, no makeup, trembling hands. She looked at the man in the bed for a full minute before she whispered, "Dad?" He didn't respond. He was barely conscious. She cried. I stepped out to give her privacy, but she asked me to stay. He used to be the smartest man I knew, she told me. He'd build me puzzles out of scrap metal. Taught me calculus before I turned 10. But after Mom died, something broke. He'd spiraled after his wife's sudden death in 2007. Quit his job. Isolated. Then disappeared. She searched for him for years. Even filed a missing persons report. But with no ID, no arrests, and no hospital admissions, he vanished into the city's invisible population. Until now. Mira stayed by his bedside the entire night. When I returned the next morning, I found her reading to him from a notebook, apparently full of letters she'd written him over the years. His vitals stabilized. Slightly. We weaned the vasopressors. His kidney function remained poor, but he was no longer crashing. I sat with her during rounds. She asked all the right questions, listened carefully, and then she said something that took me aback. If he wakes up and he doesn't know me, do I tell him what happened? It hit me then. Healing isn't always just medical. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes truth hurts more than illness. I told her the truth. I didn't know what I'd do in her shoes, because I didn't. That weekend, I wasn't on call, but I checked the chart from home. No major changes. Then Sunday night, 11:42 p.m., I got a text from Rosa, 409 is awake, asking for Mira. I rushed in early the next morning. When I walked into the room, Elijah was propped up in bed, oxygen cannula in place, eyes clear. Mira sat beside him, holding his hand. He looked at her and said, "You came back." She nodded through tears. I never left. I stood there in that moment, feeling something I rarely feel in this job. Hope. Real, tangible hope. But I should have known. Medicine is rarely linear, and the worst was yet to come. It's strange how quickly a patient can go from anonymous to unforgettable. By the end of the first week, Mr. Elijah Brooks wasn't just a room number or a case of sepsis. He was a person with a history, a daughter, a name that carried weight. The man who had arrived collapsed and nameless at the bus stop now had visitors, attention, and a second chance. And for a moment, I let myself believe that medicine had done its job, that we had saved him. But then, as it so often does, the job reminded me, a wind can turn in a heartbeat. Monday morning, I walked into 409 expecting smiles and small talk. Instead, I found Mira standing, arms crossed, facing the wall. Rosa was next to her, gently trying to calm her down. Mr. Brooks was in bed, silent, eyes open, but clearly not himself. His breathing was shallow again. His vitals, once stable, had begun to slip overnight. What happened? I asked, already checking the chart. Respiratory rate jumped around 3 a.m., Rosa said. Then blood pressure dropped. He became confused. Again, like he's somewhere else. He stared at the ceiling like he was watching ghosts. I reviewed the labs. His creatinine was rising again. Platelets dropping. Liver enzymes climbing. The sepsis hadn't relapsed. It had never fully resolved. His system had plateaued, but the infection hadn't left. The cultures from the week before came back. It was Listeria monocytogenes. Rare, but dangerous. And worse, resistant to one of the antibiotics we'd been using. It had been quietly undermining his organs while we thought he was improving. I felt the gut punch of responsibility. It wasn't a mistake. We'd done everything by protocol. But medicine doesn't care about your intentions. I told Mira. Her face was unreadable. Calm, but tight. What does this mean for him? It means, I said carefully, we need to start a new regimen. Stronger antibiotics, maybe central line access, renal support. And he's going to need intensive monitoring. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm staying. That day began a second battle, not just for Mr. Brooks' body, but for his dignity. Because as soon as I tried to transfer him to ICU, the system pushed back. He's 67 with no insurance. The ICU attending told me on the phone. He's barely stable. Renal is already backed up. We can't keep stretching the team thin for a maybe. A maybe. I sat there, stunned. Elijah wasn't some anonymous case anymore. He had a daughter, a name, a profession, a life. But in a system based on cost-benefit, he had one strike too many. Poor prognosis, poor background, poor coverage. I pushed harder. He's showing signs of recovery potential. If we stabilize his kidneys and manage the infection, then maybe he has a chance, the attending cut in. But we can't give critical care to every long shot. Send us the chart. We'll review it. I hung up and stared at my laptop. This wasn't the first time I'd fought for a bed. But this was the first time I cared this much. I sent the chart. Wrote the note with every ounce of persuasion I had. Then I went back to room 409. Mira looked up the moment I entered. Are they moving him? She asked. I'm trying, I said honestly. There's a process, but I won't give up. She didn't say anything, just nodded. That night, I stayed late. We started the new antibiotics. I called in nephro. Rosa and I put in the central line together. She didn't trust the night team with him. Around midnight, while checking his labs, Mira came up behind me. He taught me chess, she said. Made me play without a queen so I'd learn not to rely on one piece. I smiled at that. I hated it. But then, I beat him once. Only once. He said he was proud of me, and that was enough for years. She paused. Now I wish I could lose to him again. It was in that moment that I realized Mira wasn't just here to say goodbye. She was here to fight. The next morning, I got the call. ICU approved the transfer. Conditional, but it was something that we prepped him fast. Mira rode with the transport team, holding his hand the entire way. ICU day one was chaos. New team, new rules, new alarms. He coded once that night. CPR, intubation, crash meds. He came back. Barely. Day two, dialysis started. His kidneys had shut down, but nephro thought it might be temporary. Liver still fragile, but bilirubin plateaued. Mira refused to leave. ICU nurses gave her a cot. On day three, I visited during my lunch hour. He was still intubated, sedated. But when Mira played a voice recording of his old students, something a local news reporter helped her track down, his vitals improved. Not dramatically, but enough. Is that real? She asked me. Can he hear them? We think so, I said. Even sedated patients sometimes respond to voices, especially familiar ones. She kept playing them. A dozen voices thanking him, calling him Mr. Brooks, telling him he mattered. That night, the ICU attending called me. I underestimated him, she said. And you? He's tougher than he looks. I wanted to say, he's tougher than all of us. By the end of that week, we extubated him. His first words? Mira, you didn't have to come. She laughed and cried at the same time. Of course I did. He squeezed her hand. I thought that was our ending. Our miracle. But it wasn't, because on day 12, after 2 full weeks of war, the infection struck back. A sudden fever. Agitation. BP crash. Second blood culture. New bacteria. Different strain. This time, it was hospital-acquired. Our hospital. Our responsibility. The ICU team called it ventilator-associated pneumonia. A common complication. One we'd hoped to avoid. He'd made it back from the brink, only to be dragged down by the very place trying to save him. I walked into the ICU, stunned, defeated. Mira looked up, tears brimming. No, she said. No, no, no. We did everything. We did, I said. We did everything we could. He was tired. She was tired. And for the first time, I saw her doubt. Do we keep going? She asked me, voice cracking. Or do I let him rest? That was the question no one ever teaches you to answer, because sometimes doing everything doesn't mean doing what's right. Room 509 of the ICU. That's where they moved Mr. Elijah Brooks after the second crash. They hadn't wanted to intubate him again. His lungs were too fragile. His body exhausted. We pushed oxygen through high-flow nasal cannula and prayed it would be enough. Sometimes it was. Mostly, it wasn't. His eyes opened less often now. When they did, he rarely recognized us. But Mira never stopped sitting at his bedside. We were in uncharted waters. Not because of the medicine, but because of what came next. The hospital ethics committee called me on a Tuesday. 2 people I didn't know and 1 senior attending sat me down in a glass-walled conference room and started with, Dr. Keller, we'd like to discuss goals of care for Mr. Brooks. That phrase, goals of care, it's code. Code for, should we let this man die? They weren't cruel. They weren't wrong. From a clinical standpoint, Elijah's condition was grim. He was a dialysis-dependent, septic, oxygen-saturated, 67-year-old man with no insurance, no income, and a shrinking prognosis. They referenced charts, statistics, outcome studies, all carefully worded. And then they said, if the family is open to hospice, we could arrange a transition within 48 hours. They meant Mira. She wasn't even his official power of attorney. She hadn't seen him in over a decade before he landed in our ER. But now she was his only advocate, his voice, his shield, and she was breaking under the pressure. That night, I sat with her in the hospital cafeteria. It was almost empty, just vending machines humming and one tired janitor mopping near the exit. I don't know what to do anymore, she said. Every time I think he's gone, he breathes again. And every time I think we've got him back, he slips away. I didn't interrupt. Just let her talk. He was gone for 15 years, Dr. Keller. 15. And now he's here. He's here. But it's like I'm mourning him in slow motion. Her hands trembled as she clutched her coffee. I want to do right by him. But I don't even know what he would want. That's the part that kills you as a doctor. Watching family carry the weight you can't lift. Sometimes, I said quietly, we give everything to bring someone back, and the kindest thing we can do next is give them permission to stop fighting. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with eyes hollowed by 1,000 questions. The next morning, she asked for a family meeting. We brought in the palliative care team, the attending, me, and a chaplain. She sat at the head of the table and read a letter that it was short. Just a few paragraphs she'd written the night before. She said she believed her father was tired, that his fight had been long, that she wanted to honor him, not prolong him, and that if he didn't improve within 24 hours, she wanted him transitioned to comfort care. The room was silent after that I remember looking at her and realizing she wasn't just saying goodbye to her father. She was letting go of 15 years of guilt, searching, silence. All of it. That night, his vitals dropped again. O2 saturation fell to 70%. His heart rate slowed. We increased support, but it was clear the end was near. Mira held his hand, whispered to him about childhood summers, fireworks at Navy Pier, the sound of her mother's laugh, and at 3:13 a.m., Elijah Brooks exhaled for the last time in O code. No panic, just peace. I was there. Rosa, too. That we stood in silence as Mira closed his eyes and kissed his forehead. That I signed the death certificate myself. Cause of death, septic shock. Contributing factors, hospital-acquired pneumonia, end-stage renal failure. But I wanted to write something else. Cause of death, the weight of being forgotten. Contributing factor, being found too late. The next day, I thought that would be the end of it, but Mira came back to the hospital. Not for forms, not for ashes, for me. She handed me a small white envelope. Inside was a photo, her as a child on her father's shoulders, both of them smiling in front of a chalkboard filled with equations. Thank you, she said, for giving him a name again. I kept that photo. Still have it in my locker. I thought that was the end of the story, but a week later, HR called. There was an inquiry about ICU resource use, about non-beneficial care, about whether the decision to push for escalation, my decision, had gone against hospital policy. That you'd think saving a man's life, or at least giving him a chance to say goodbye, would be the victory. But the system doesn't run on moments. It runs on margins. I sat through a review. Quiet, administrative, sterile. They didn't punish me, but they made it clear. Next time, think twice. 3 weeks after Elijah Brooks died, I found myself walking the same hallway where room 409 had once been. It was quiet that day. Snow flurries drifted outside the narrow ICU windows, and for once, no alarms were sounding. I paused in front of the room that had held so much pain, memory, and hope. Now it was empty. Clean sheets. A digital monitor blinking 0. I stood there for a full minute. In this hospital, most rooms forget you, but I couldn't forget him. The fallout. The formal review ended with no consequences, but not without warnings. I received a polite letter in my file recommending closer alignment with resource protocols and more conservative escalation in low prognosis cases. In plain English, next time, let him go sooner. Colleagues were polite, some even supportive in private. But I noticed the change. A little more distance at meetings. Less eye contact from ICU. One attending even said, "You care too much sometimes, Keller. It's going to burn you out." Maybe he was right. But maybe that was the point. The system. You learn early in medicine that the system isn't built for miracles. It's built for throughput. It rewards efficiency, numbers, cost savings. And sometimes that makes sense. You can't pour unlimited care into unlimited patients. Not when beds are scarce, nurses stretched thin, and insurers breathing down your neck. But then a man like Elijah Brooks comes in. NOID. No insurance. No visible future. And yet, for a brief moment, he reminded me what this job used to be about. Not just surviving. Not just treating symptoms, but seeing people, their past, their pain, their stories. The letter. One day after my shift, there was an envelope in my locker. No return address. Inside was a short note. "Dr. Keller, I buried Dad last weekend. Just me, a few of his students from Englewood, and one old friend who found out through the blog post. We played a few jazz records, drank sweet tea, and shared stories. There wasn't much left of him by the end. But because of you, I got to hold his hand, hear his voice, and say goodbye to the man I thought I'd lost forever. You didn't just give him a bed. You gave him back to me. Thank you. Marai read it twice. Then I tucked it behind the photo she'd given me, the one I still kept in my locker door. The resident. A few days later, I was supervising rounds with a new resident. First year, still nervous, eyes constantly darting to the chart for confirmation. We came across a case. 81-year-old woman, advanced heart failure, minimal family support, likely hospice-bound. The resident asked me, should we just write her off? Focus on discharge. I paused. Then I said, let's go talk to her first. We found her sitting upright, quietly reading a Danielle Steele novel. She looked up and smiled like we were her grandchildren. We spent 25 minutes with her. No big interventions. No fancy scans. Just talking. She told us about her husband, her old teaching days, her cat who once got stuck in a Christmas tree. Afterward, the resident looked surprised. I thought you'd want to move on quickly, she said. I shrugged. Sometimes being a doctor isn't about moving on. It's about staying. That day, the resident didn't learn about meds or fluid management. She learned about presence. The next call 2 months later, I got a call from the ER. Another John Doe, homeless, collapsed, possible sepsis, found near a gas station on the south side. Same profile, same story, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I went down myself. Walked into the trauma bay, read the chart, looked at the man lying unconscious on the gurney. Then I looked at the nurse and said, let's start the workup. Not because I thought we'd win, but because he deserved the chance. Because Elijah Brooks taught me that every name, even the forgotten ones, deserve to be spoken out loud at least once. Epilogue. I don't remember most of the names that passed through my hands, but I remember the ones who asked me to be more than just a doctor. The ones who didn't survive, but helped me live better. I remember the man in room 409. Not for how he died, but for how he made me feel alive again. The end.